For anyone who is a historian or major history geek, there is that one topic. That one thing you absolutely cannot get enough of, and you will tear through every single book and archival document that you can possibly find. For me, that is the air war over Vietnam and the air components of the Arab-Israeli wars and the Iran-Iraq war. And for today's video, our main source for today's topic is on Yankee Station, the naval air war over Vietnam. And as always guys, I'm Spud, and today we are resurrecting a mission type that has been lost to history as warfighting has changed and evolved. We'll be going over its history, how to set it up in the DCS mission editor, and finish off with how to fly it realistically and hopefully successfully. Flak suppression has really been around since the first time someone pointed a gun up in the air and took a shot at an airplane. And since the Great War, these guns pointed up have only gotten bigger and bigger. By the time of the Second World War, flak was a major threat to the air forces of all sides, but it was in the Pacific that the idea of fighting back against flak batteries really took hold in terms of doctrine and tactics. While flak was a major threat to Allied strategic bombers in the air war over Europe, flak suppression wasn't as much of an option due to American and British Flying Fortress, Liberator, and Lancaster crews needing to traverse half a continent at 25,000 plus feet and over hundreds if not thousands of flak batteries to reach their targets deep within occupied Europe. However, in the Pacific, the air war was conducted at much lower altitudes by smaller medium bombers, fighter bombers, dive bombers, and torpedo bombers against mostly geographically isolated targets, such as an airfield on a beautiful tropical island or a ship within a fleet. These pinpoint targets allowed for the massing of anti-aircraft guns around an island airfield, and of course the ever-increasing number of AAA guns aboard Allied and Japanese ships, creating what we would call today the first point defenses. This, combined with the usually much lower altitudes of the Pacific theater, made Allied aircraft vulnerable to more than just the heavy 88s of the ETO, and everything from the highest caliber battleship gun to an infantryman's rifle could be brought to bear against attacking aircraft. This led to the first developed tactics of flak suppression within the US Navy, Marine Corps, and the 5th Air Force, and was partially, if not directly, responsible for the ever-increasing number of Browning 50 cals on 5th Air Force B-25s throughout the course of the war. These flak suppression tactics consisted mainly of machine gun or cannon-armed fighters or fighter bombers strafing enemy AAA positions around a target, or in the case of a naval target, strafing the deck of the ship to disrupt gun crews from being able to perform their job when strike aircraft arrived on target. These flak suppressors would usually roll in on their targets seconds before dive bombers, torpedo bombers, or medium bombers hit the target area for the greatest suppressive effect. Usually these strafing attacks did not actually destroy the flak guns themselves, but rather suppressed the gun crews, forcing them to dive for cover and retrieve wounded or dying comrades, and create a situation where they were unable to reconstitute themselves and train their guns on the newly arrived strike aircraft, like the low-flying B-25 Mitchells dropping their parachute-retarded bombs. And I'm sure you're probably starting to see some parallels between modern SEAD tactics and yesterday's flak suppression missions already. By the Korean War, flak suppression tactics really hadn't changed much, as the air war over Korea saw a mishmash merge of tactics and doctrine from both the ETO and PTO, and the addition of untested tactics of the new jet age. By the late 1950s and early 60s, and the start of American involvement in Vietnam, jets became faster and faster and larger, and flak suppression became ever more vital as Soviet-built flak guns became larger and larger, and their firing rate increased substantially, along with the introduction of better and more accurate radar and fire direction equipment, like the introduction of radars like the SAW-9 fire can. But as the speeds and altitudes of the jet age increased, the cannons and 50 cal machine guns of World War II and the Korean War fell out of favor for a new breed of weapons that would become far more devastating for AAA crews. With the failure of the 2.75-inch rocket in air-to-air use in several high-profile and humiliating events such as the Battle of Palmdale, the US Air Force realized that the Hydra rocket, while unsuitable for air-to-air use, would be a perfect area effect weapon against soft and lightly armored ground targets. These 2.75-inch FFARs, along with China Lake's Zuni rocket, would become the weapon of choice for suppressing the numerous flak batteries and AAA installations scattered across North Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. While the aircraft, speeds, altitudes, weapons, and for the most part air crews had changed, the basic flak suppression tactics remained mostly unchanged since the days of dropping parachute bombs on Japanese airfields. Flak suppression flights, usually made up of fast and maneuverable fighters such as the F-100 Super Sabre and F-8 Crusader in the early stages of Rolling Thunder, would roll in and ripple off volleys of FFARs and Zuni rockets at the areas of known flak batteries around pinpoint targets such as the Dragon's Jaw or Paul Domer bridges, saturating the area with rockets and sending AAA gunners scrambling for cover, and hopefully damaging their guns or radar fire directors in the process, allowing strike flights of A-1 Sky Raiders, A-4 Skyhawks, and F-105 Thunder Chiefs to attack their targets unmolested by AAA. While things seldomly went exactly to plan, and strike aircraft did still fall to AAA, the success of flak suppression was undeniable due to the absolutely massive attrition rates of North Vietnamese gunners, who at certain points were forcibly strapped to their gunners' positions in an attempt to keep their guns online in the face of diving Super Sabres and Crusaders. Late in Rolling Thunder, Super Sabres and Crusaders would also be joined on their flak suppression missions by F-105s, A-4s, and eventually F-4 Phantoms. Forward-firing rockets were supplemented in the flak suppression role by cluster munitions of the CBU and Rockeye family, which necessitated flak suppression flights to adjust their timing to allow the free-fall munitions to take effect. Cluster munitions typically took a greater toll on AAA crews and equipment, but led to reduced suppressive effects for follow-on strike aircraft due to the reduced immediacy of their impacts on target and precise timing required. With the introduction of the SA-2 guideline into North Vietnam, these flak suppression tactics rapidly evolved to what many of you guys are probably more familiar with in DCS. Wild Weasel, Iron Hand, and eventually modern SEAD and DIAD tactics. Wild Weasels first looked far more like specialized flak suppression missions than what we think of today, with F-100 Super Sabres attacking SAM sites with specialized radar homing gear and LAU-3 rocket pods. So how do we incorporate flak suppression into Cold War-themed DCS missions through the mission editor? And how do we fly as realistically as possible in the flak suppression role and live to fight another day while protecting our strikers? We all know that DCS does not simulate human fear or survival instinct, in that AI gunners will steadfastly man their positions and continue to fire with pinpoint accuracy as a hail of rockets or CBU bomblets explode all around them as they hope to be awarded with the Order of Ho Chi Minh or an honorary Order of Lenin. So this requires a bit of mission editor creativity, so this is what I've come up with so far, and if anyone else has any other ideas or suggestions, please let me know in the comments section down below. Alright guys, we're here in the mission editor to take a look at some triggers that you can create and associate with a flak battery to allow the player or players in your mission to successfully suppress that flak battery and hopefully give the strikers an easier time getting their bombs on target. And defending Cabrit Air Base, we have a single flak battery for the brevity and simplicity of today's demonstration. Now we can see our flak battery here is kind of set up in the stereotypical Soviet circle the wagons kind of setup with a SON 9 fire can radar fire control unit in the very center and arrayed around it some heavier and medium caliber AAA guns in order to provide the firepower. However, the magic of today and what we're setting up for actually making this site suppressible has nothing to do with actually this setup. You can be as creative or go as wild as you want when it comes to placing the units. What's very important is the triggers we're creating here in the trigger menu. Now, one thing to keep in mind, and especially if you're creating a mission for multiplayer, is to make your triggers as broad as possible, because players are always going to do something a little bit different than maybe you were expecting. Maybe you were expecting your flak suppression flights armed with rocket pods to hit and suppress the flak batteries. But it turns out that they decided to rearm with CBUs. Or maybe even one of your strike jets accidentally dropped a string of Mark 82s across it. And of course you want it to be suppressed in that kind of fashion as well. So the first thing we're going to do is obviously create a new trigger here. And we'll go ahead and call this guy Flak Suppression 1. So that way we can keep track of these triggers as we add more and more and more flak batteries to our mission. Now we need a condition. For this and in particular the suppression of this flak battery, I want to go with unit damage. Now you may be thinking, Spud, why don't you just use the missile in zone or bomb in zone trigger for this? And that is definitely a very valid point. However, there's unfortunately no rocket in zone condition available in DCS as of this moment. And also keep in mind, we're trying to go as broad as possible, so that way this site can be suppressed with really any weapon that may be present in your mission. So with that in mind, we're going to set this to flak battery unit. So always when you create different groups of units, to always give the individual units a name that makes sense, so that way you can keep track of them. Then for the action, we want to go to group AI off. So that way if the unit labeled flak battery is damaged by any kind of weapon, whether that be a bullet, a rocket, a bomb, or a missile, it is going to turn off the group AI. Now, in order to make this trigger as broad as possible, we're going to clone this and just keep on going down the list with all the different units that are associated with that particular flak battery. And we're just going to keep on going down the full list of units. So that way, if any of the units in our flak battery get damaged, the AI will be turned off and the flak battery will be successfully suppressed. Now, if we were to leave this stack of conditions exactly as it is now, it would be undesirable, because this would mean that every single unit in that group now has to be damaged in order to turn that group AI off. So we're going to go ahead and put OR statements, so that way in case only a few of our players' rockets land within the scope of the flak battery itself, they're more than likely going to damage at least one of the units, and that will be enough to suppress the whole flak battery. Because honestly, in real life, if a big volley of rockets landed right next to your flak battery, you're probably running and diving for cover anyway. So with that, we're also going to hit a new action over here, and we'll go to set flag value, and we'll go for flag 100 value of 2 to make it as specific as possible. So that way, in case we accidentally set another trigger up and it gets left at the default value of 1 and 1, that way we won't have something firing unintentionally. But you can really set this to any flag number and any value you desire. We'll then create a new trigger zone here, and we'll just call it Flak Suppression 1 continued. And we'll create a new condition, and we'll say flag equals, and we'll set our flag that we had set in the first trigger of 100 and a value of 2. And we will also create another condition that will be time since flag. And it'll be flag 100, and we'll go for 180 seconds. We'll create a new action, and it will be group AI on flak battery. So what we just created here is after the flak battery is suppressed due to damage being taken by one of the units associated with the flak battery, after 180 seconds, the flak battery's AI will turn back on, so the flak battery's crew has kind of reconstituted themselves, they've gotten back to their guns, and they're going to start shooting at the players once again. This gives our strikers a window of 3 minutes to get their bombs onto target without being harassed by flak by at least this particular flak battery. Now, unfortunately, the downside of setting up these triggers here is that you're going to have to set up these triggers individually for every single flak battery in your mission. With this out of the way and kind of showing you guys an example of how you can set this up, let's hop into the cockpit and talk about how to fly a flak suppression mission. When it comes to flying a flak suppression mission, it's really going to be very similar to flying a regular strike mission in the Cold War time period. However, timing is absolutely critical to ensure that the suppression effect is still there on those flak battery crews by the time your strikers actually roll in on their targets. To accomplish this, I recommend you fly as the lead for the strike package itself, so that way you roll in on the target and the strikers will be following you very close behind, and they'll be able to keep an eye on you flying right behind you in the larger strike package. When it comes to actually employing your rockets on a flak battery, you want to ensure that you have a very steep dive angle. The steeper the dive angle, the better, for multiple reasons. Number one, you won't have to correct for the ballistic flight profile of your unguided rockets once they leave your aircraft. Number two, it's going to be harder for the guns on the ground to elevate high enough to actually hit you, and it's going to be more difficult for those guns to traverse and keep track of you when they're elevated so far up. And of course, it's going to be harder for the gunners down on the ground to keep track of you visually while they're shooting at you, because I challenge you to look directly straight up above you for an extended period of time. It's probably pretty darn uncomfortable, right? So as a result, in order to get as steep of a dive angle as possible, you want to delay your roll-in maneuver. So as you're flying the offset, setting up for the roll-in maneuver, wait, and ensure that your offset isn't too far away from your target. A steep dive angle is also going to allow you a nice, good view of the target area, and you'll be able to identify the AAA batteries around your target area as easily as possible. Obviously, we can very easily see our AAA battery located in the very center of Cabrit Air Base. Now, this will allow you to identify those AAA batteries early and assign members of your flight individual flak batteries to go after. You can also, of course, pre-plan which members of your flight are going to go after which flak batteries if you have imagery available to you of the target area in the planning phase. So we've delayed our roll in here, so we should have a nice deep dive angle on our target, and we'll go ahead and roll in. The steep dive angle is also going to give you an extra boost in your energy state to allow you to pull off the target area and get away from the flak batteries as quickly as possible. Once you're lined up, just simply fire away. And of course, pull off and try to fly as unpredictably, giving a good jinking maneuver to ensure you throw off the aim of any optically guided AAA that could be tracking you as well. Looks like we killed at least a few units in that AAA battery with some lucky hits from our rockets. That will keep that flak battery suppressed for at least 3 minutes, as set in the triggers, so that way our strikers will have an easy time hitting their targets as unmolested by AAA as possible. So let's go ahead and swap on over and do a demonstration of flak suppression with CBUs. When it comes to utilizing CBUs in the flak suppression role, you still want to go for a pretty steep dive onto your target to limit your exposure to the flak batteries you're attacking, as well as allow you to have a good view of the target and identify the flak battery that you're currently assigned to. However, you're going to want to bias yourself towards a little bit of a flatter dive angle in order to get a better dispersion of your CBU bomblets across the target. Just keep in mind, the flatter you are, the more exposed you are to that flak battery. Alright, we can see our target, and we'll go ahead and start our rolling at this point a little bit earlier than last time so we can get a little bit of a flatter dive onto our target. We'll put our pipper right onto our target. We'll command Jester to lock the ground for ranging information. And we'll start pressing and holding our bomb button to release our CBUs. We'll perform a jinking maneuver coming off of the target to throw off any optically or manually guided flak guns down there. And we'll roll over and check out our BDA. Nice. Direct hit right on top of that flak battery. However, as we can see, we're going to need to adjust our timing in terms of when the strikers should roll onto their targets, because you can see just how long it took for those weapons to impact the target in comparison to the rockets we fired in the first demonstration. So as a result of this, I believe that unguided rockets, whether in Zuni form on the A4 Skyhawk or in Hydra form here on the F-4E Phantom II, are going to be the superior weapon choice when it comes to flak suppression in DCS world. So I hope this video was interesting for you guys, and I hope you guys learned something new about the air war over Vietnam, and I hope that we can resurrect this rather dead mission type and integrate it into our Cold War themed missions and servers moving forward. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope you liked the video. Please leave a like and a subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.